You're alive.
People called me a fanatic. People called me a rebel. People called me a revolutionary. People threw rotten eggs at me, tomatoes, and maybe it's better if I turned it over here a little bit. Okay. And they even called me a lunatic. But I call myself Susan B. Anthony, the woman who opposed the male-dominated authority who created the laws and government in America. Of these crimes, I am guilty. You know, I had a dream. I dreamed of the new true woman, a woman who was independent and not subservient to men. She was able to be free and do what she wanted in life, express her talents without their male authority. And it wasn't completely fulfilled, but there were 3 little words that kept me going. Failure is impossible. And perhaps one day that dream will come true. Now, I was born February the 15th, 1820. I was the second of 7 children born to Lucy and Daniel Anthony. Now, they were Quakers who lived in England, and they were being persecuted because of their religion. Quakers believed that all women and all men are created equal. And that wasn't expressed in England at that time. So they moved to America. And what did they find here? Slavery. So Father became involved in the abolitionist movement at that time. Now, you know, I have my face usually here to the left, and the pictures and photographs are taken of that. Not all, but mostly if I have my way. Because at the age of 3, I suffered an intense case of whooping cough, and my eyes became crossed. I thought they would never be uncrossed, but eventually the left eye slowly went back, but my right eye still wanders. So I have to say I'm self-conscious of it. I've asked the Lord to forgive me of my pride. Quakers are supposed to be very humble. At the age of 17, you wonder, why is it Susan B. Anthony? What is my middle name? Brownell. I detested that. So at the age of, in the Quaker, when we're an adult at 17, I changed it to B. So from then after, it is Susan B. Anthony. Now, Father sent his children to the private Quaker schools. You know what kind of classes we girls had to be taught? How to be a better mother and wife. Spinning, embroidery, cooking, household management for those that were born in richer families. And they had slaves and maids. I dare say that wasn't for me. I wanted to learn and have an IQ, the mind, the intellect. Classes like geography, history, mathematics, writing, literature, but they weren't available to myself. And I have to admit that I like to stir things up a bit. I would ask questions in class. I'm demanding answers. Not acceptable. I was opinionated. And I also gave my opinion, even when it wasn't asked. Women had to be quiet. Well, after I graduated, I moved to New Rochelle, New York, and taught at a private Quaker school for girls. You know what I found out? That the men made 3/4 more in pay a month than I did. Oh, I was revolted to find that out. And when President Van Buren came, there were charades and parades. I refused to attend. He had a black slave hand him water to clear his throat while he was speaking. And at the end of his speech, what did he say? God bless America and let freedom ring. Well, freedom not for the black slave, I dare say. And also, I believe that no person, child, adult, should rise above anybody else, even though he may be President of the United States. Well, I returned home to the farm. Father had bought a large farm, and he also started another private school. And I have to say that I was proposed to, even though I was called a spinster during that period of time. There were widowers who came to ask me to be their wife. In fact, one of the men got on his knees practically, and he bragged about, oh, this beautiful large home he had, many acres, and 60 cows. Well, I knew what he wanted. He wanted a free housekeeper and nanny for the children, because most of the wives had died during childbirth from a deadly infection because there were no antibiotics. I refused to be an unpaid person. I deserved better than that. Well, I became active in the temperance movement as I looked at women and what kind of lives they were leading. At that time, the women had no rights, and these men would drink alcohol, become drunk, perhaps beat their children and the wives, and poverty existed. What kind of life is that for a woman? My solution? Outlaw alcohol. So I became a member of the Daughters of Temperance and had my first public speech May the 2nd, 1848. And I had a wonderful passion to come to the audience and fight for the rights of women. Another aspect that I got involved in were women who were put into insane asylums by their husbands for no reason at all. These insane asylums were worse than prisons. They were despicable, horrible places. A few times I did try to free these women, and their husbands threatened to put me in jail. That never happened, I dare say. And you know what? I wouldn't have minded going to jail, because I always believed bad publicity is better than no publicity at all. Well, the day that I remember the most is on May the 5th, 1851. Oh, that was the day that changed my life. I went to Seneca Falls, New York, to hear Elizabeth Cady Stanton speak. She had written the Articles of Sentiments, which were the rights of women, not only to vote, but to have the free expression of all that the men at that time had. Immediately, we bonded, and our friendship has lasted longer than 50 years. I loved her very, very much. She had the most wonderful gift of writing. She could move people to act and to change laws. You know, I loved to make history, but I detested writing about it. And we disagreed at times, but ultimately, the friendship outlasted all of that disagreement. She even, when she and her husband moved to New York City, they had a special room set aside for me for when I came to stay there. I would watch her 7 children, she had 7 children, while she would sit in her own study and write the speeches and form our strategy. Well, New York then, with the 2 of us together, started to change women's lives. We could see it. And New York City became the most sophisticated center at that time for women to get involved with the movement. We formed the Women's Loyal National League and also the American Equal Rights Association, which demanded equal rights for women and African Americans. As Emerson says, it is better to be a thorn in the side of your friend than an echo. Well, I fought for teachers' rights at that time because mostly that's the opportunity for women who were educated, were in the teaching profession, to get the same wages as men, and also for the teachers to form unions, which at that time never made the progression that I wished it to. Now, it was at my anti-slavery lectures that I was mobbed, especially in the South when I went. They called me dangerous, that I was a man-hater. And that's when I realized the hatred that can exist with words and expressed towards me. But it never stopped me because my 3 words, failure is impossible. And I had to literally beg for money to travel throughout the country to give my speeches. Occasionally there would be some help, but mostly it came from the donations. April 12th, 1861, the Civil War began with President Lincoln. You know, I always thought people think he did it for the slavery, the issues, but I always thought it was because he really wanted to save the Union. I wanted the government to quickly end the war, get it over with, free the slaves, and then have the slaved Negro men join the Union Army. But it never worked out that way, unfortunately. We know history and what happened. And unfortunate for the women's campaign, because during that period of time, during the war, all headway we made for women was repealed. And they asked me to cease campaigning for the women's vote. And I said, here we are, women, we have to sacrifice again. But Elizabeth and I, we did so. I moved to Kansas City at the time. My brother Daniel owned a publishing company, a newspaper. So I would write articles from there. The 13th Amendment passed, abolishing slavery. The 14th Amendment came. granting citizenship to the slaves and so forth. And I thought, certainly the 15th Amendment is going to include the women in the vote. No. In 1870, when the 15th Amendment passed, just allowing the black men to vote, I felt betrayed, disappointed, and that was the most depressed I became within the movement. All of those that we had supported to get those amendments passed legally, even Frederick Douglass did not support that. Well, Elizabeth and I then said, we have to form our own revolution, Susan. So I moved from Kansas City in 1870 back to New York City. And we started, Elizabeth, of course, with the funding, our own newspaper titled Revolution. I'm telling you, it's not a place where you're going to find recipes. It was filled with very, very real issues, hard fact, and to the point about what we must do, women, to get our rights finally through the lawmakers. Well, unfortunately, through that, many of the conservative women broke away, and they formed their own more pacifying groups. Elizabeth and I called that. Elizabeth was a writer that spoke her truth in many ways, and it came across as a very, very tainted way of looking at men. But that's how she felt, and we felt that through that betrayal. In 1872, I was arrested for voting, Rochester, New York. I wanted to get arrested. I wanted the police to come, them to take a picture, put the shackles on, and put me in jail. As I said, bad publicity is better than no publicity. But it didn't happen. A lawyer came, paid the bail, case closed. Well, now, as time went on, younger women came and formed the Army, we called it. And they would, with much pride, call me the General. So here I was called the General, and the younger women came, and they were willing to come and carry on the fight. Thank God that they did. In 1905, went to President Teddy Roosevelt, told him it was imperative that he put the amendment to for women to vote. To no avail. He said no, he was not interested. Well, someone once asked me, Susan, when you're gone, what do you want people, what should they remember about you? And this is my answer. I believe in the future. I want you to dream and believe with me. I believe there will be a new, true woman who will arise. No longer will she be dependent upon a man. She will be independent. She will be able to marry, have a position, or remain single, sign contracts, and buy property. I must continue to dream this, and I will continue to labor and fight for all born and unborn females the rest of my life. Because failure is impossible. Thank you, ladies.